Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Fantasaster. This is Battlefield 1, Battlefield 4, Battlefield 5, a little bit of mix of everything, because really we're talking about Battlefield 5 today, and we're going to be comparing it a little bit to Battlefield 1 while looking at some Battlefield 4, Battlefield 1 footage, and Battlefield 5 concept art, trailers, etc. It's a little bit of a mixed bag of an episode, but what we're talking about really today is Battlefield 5, what we know so far, and whether or not we should be hyped essentially about what we know. On the one side, we have the official launch event, now of course a few days already passed, and then we've got secondary information from YouTubers painting a very different picture as to what exactly Battlefield 5 is going to be. And this is why I've left this video a little bit later than most of the other YouTubers and people you maybe follow regarding Battlefield news, because I wanted to get a full impression of how the community reacts and what additional information we get now that we're slowly but surely moving towards EA Play. That being said, what I want to talk about a little bit today is the immersion customization elements of Battlefield 5, game mechanics, talking about things like squad play, team play, fortification, movement systems, and weapon designs, as well as, of course, we have to talk a little bit about communication and trailer and the way the game has been presented to us and the fallacies, the mistakes clearly made here. And all of that, hopefully, in a video that is not too damn long. That being said then, I'd like to start off with a little bit more of a lighter topic, and that is what I think the three main things are that really are going to make this Battlefield more successful, better, or at least different from previous Battlefield experiences. And the ones that immediately come to mind here, for me, is no premium pass. The lack of splitting the player base, this far more modern, continuous model where content keeps on being added to the game, keeping the game fresh, keeping people interested. I think this is going to be a game changer for Battlefield, because it's going to turn the game from a previously very kind of everybody plays the game, everybody buys the game, everybody stops playing the game game is basically dead, and only a couple of thousand people play the DLCs, or a couple of 10,000 people, to a far more continuous, enjoyable experience. Because more players ultimately are not only good for those of us who like to play Battlefield beyond the first few months after it's launched, but also for the devs, because they can develop a larger variety of game modes and things like that, because they have the player numbers to do so. Also, it means all of us are going to be sticking to the same maps and guns. There's going to be no competitive advantage for anybody simply because they put more money into the game. So the lack of premium pass, absolutely a wonderful change, but a very much expected change. A less expected change is something that we're not quite as clear on just yet, are the archetypes or skill tree like soldier additions that we've got. Now there's not too much detail on this just yet, but the way I understood this is essentially that you're going to be able to specialize within your class to different varieties of that class, kind of specialized versions of, for example, the recon class. And this is the example I got, at least, from one of the third-party sources, one of the YouTubers who was allowed to have a little bit more information from DICE themselves. And it was regarding a recon paratrooper who was equipped with silent footsteps, throwing knives, smoke grenades, and generally silenced weapons for close quarters, who was supposed to kind of fill this very specific role within the battlefield. And that is quite interesting if it is actually as immersive and as detailed and different than from what we actually are used to in Battlefield 1, because that's a little bit breaking up this classic 4-class system. Now, we still have 4 distinct classes. They are the same as they were in Battlefield 1, but it seems to be like DICE is investing a little bit more time and resources into giving us a little bit more options regarding those individual classes and playstyles. I mean, simply the fact that we now once more are going to get a close quarter orientated recon with a truly competent weapon, which for the longest time in Battlefield 1, the one close quarter-ish weapon that we had was not, now you could make an argument for, is exciting news for me. And I think there's a huge amount of potential here to change up the gameplay. And lastly, then we've got the afflictions, so the no more further max health regen automatically, the interactions for ammo, health, and revives, the lack of ammo when you spawn, or the lack of full capacity spawning when it comes to ammo. All these changes to kind of make it a more hardcore shooter, and what DICE has termed essentially afflictions, they are going to be very interesting, because they could either make Battlefield feel not like Battlefield, more like Arma, or they could really bring Battlefield back to a more slightly competitive, more immersive, kind of long-term, more enjoyable experience, where there's more to get your teeth in, where it's a more enjoyable game to play in the long term. But that being said, let's touch then on those 3 main topics that I wanted to talk about before this video ends up being 25 minutes. The first is the trailer. And I'm not here to bash on DICE for the trailer, but everybody knows the trailer wasn't really that good. You look at the like to dislike ratio, people weren't anywhere close to as happy as they were with the Battlefield 1 trailer. And having looked at Battlefield 3 trailers, Battlefield 4 trailers, Battlefield 1 trailers over the past few days, I seem to understand slowly why. And why I personally wasn't a big fan of that trailer either. First of all, it's no way representative of the game. It looks very much like an overblown COD montage, which, not knocking COD, but COD is not Battlefield, and Battlefield players, when they see a Battlefield trailer, want to be seeing a trailer for a Battlefield game, not necessarily for the next installment of Call of Duty World War II version 2. That's the first point. The second point is it doesn't give you any kind of idea of what Battlefield is really going to be like. Unlike previous trailers, and specifically the Battlefield 1 trailer, which was so good, it didn't give you as much information about how gameplay would be and how exactly the game would work, but it set the theme, it set the thematic elements, it set the mood, and it made the whole thing look quite grave, quite serious, which is what's typical for Battlefield, because these are immersive games, whereas the trailer that we got just made it look like Michael Bay got his hands on DICE's animation studios and just went absolutely mad when it came to how can we make this thing as ridiculous as possible. Now, the more important part of this, in my opinion, is the communication element of this. Why is it that I as YouTuber, you as community, or we all as community rather, are getting more information about the coming Battlefield 5 from YouTubers such as Jack Frags, Level Cap Gaming, and all of them, there's plenty of them out there, than we are actually from watching the live reveal event? That's just silly. All the information that was available to us regarding the specifics as to changes that we have actually now learned that we've got from third parties shouldn't have been presented to us by those third parties. They should have been presented at the event. I don't have a problem with Jack Frags making a video afterwards on Battlefield 5 and what he thinks or the changes. Actually, I welcome it. I'll link his video down below in the description because it is the most consolidated, most detailed version of changes that you can actually find, because he's got more information than DICE has given us. I think that's a mistake. I think that's really just immediately going against the whole thing they were talking about communicating more with the community. That was one of the big things they stressed in their presentation. And then the first thing they do is withhold half of the information and give it to a very select group of players, select group of people, so that they can then present it to us instead of getting it straight from the devs. That's silly. That's shooting yourself in the foot. And the same goes for the communication on devs regarding the social medias, at least some of them, regarding some of the controversies. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of whether or not we should have women in Battlefield 5, whether or not putting them on the cover page was too much or is a progressive step and is great to get more people involved in playing Battlefield. That's just not the topic of today's video. You're all entitled to your opinion. But one way or another, there was a backlash to it. And the devs' reaction to it and some of the issues with customization, which we will touch on a little bit later, have been either relatively ignorant in that they just refuse to acknowledge them. Some of them have gone into them and say, wait for the actual multiplayer trailer reveal. You'll see that things aren't quite as bad as you think they are. And some have just outright say they don't care for the opinions of others regarding those specific matters because they disagree on them. Way to go, DICE, on once again honing in on that communication with the community, which you literally said in your reveal trailer, in your reveal event rather, was going to be a big staple of Battlefield 5. I really hope those were not empty words, but already now they seem to be looking like just that. But away from the presentation elements, into the immersion and customization elements. And this is once more where I'm going to be a little bit critical of Battlefield 5. I do promise this video isn't actually a rant montage. There's plenty of positive things to talk about in the later part. Regarding immersion and customization, however, I have no problem with customization as a way of revenue generation for Battlefield 5 so that we have no premium model so everybody can play the game. It's actually my preferred method. That's the way they should do it if they can't essentially afford or don't want to afford, just basically putting the game out there for $60, everybody gets to play it, and that's it. Customization elements are free, etc, etc. So that's fine. But I do not want to be playing a Battlefield game where I am fighting against everything from Rambo or some character from Braveheart or a Pirates of the Caribbean knockoff. That's not Battlefield. And I'm well aware that Battlefield games are not supposed to be historically accurate necessarily, but they are supposed to be thematically accurate. You are supposed to be immersed and feel like you are in that conflict at that period of time. And Battlefield 1 did that just fine, despite using weapons that maybe were only prototypes or slightly earlier or later than the actual war, or vehicles that really didn't see that many interactions in the war. I mean, the German A7 heavy tank, A7V I believe it's called, wasn't actually produced in any kind of number high enough to warrant even 2 or 3 conquest games. That would be the extent of all of those German tanks already blown up. I think there was like 10, 20 or 30 ever produced in World War I. But it was still immersive. It all worked together. Whereas if I'm going to be fighting somebody who's basically only got a tank top on and a big machine gun, and next to him there's some British woman running around with a prosthetic arm, somehow still managing to operate her rifle, that is personally gonna bug me. That's going a little bit too far. It's going to impact my immersion, personally. That's my personal opinion. You're entitled to a different one. So my issue here really is with the customization elements. Just to clarify, not necessarily with the elements that we will have female characters in Battlefield 5 on the actual multiplayer battleground. Leaving immersion aside, let's get into the nitty-gritties then of game mechanics. And the 4 things I want to touch on here first. Squad play and team play is one of the more controversial elements. And I mean controversial not because squad or team play are bad things. Don't misunderstand me. We have ultimately in Battlefield 1 and other Battlefield series games a team shooter, a squad play shooter. That's what it's supposed to be. But you need to find the right balance. And here's where I'm a little bit worried about the stress they're putting on team play. If you can no longer operate well without reliance on your teammates, something's going to go wrong. And that's simply because players in Battlefield, as has been proved in Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, especially Battlefield 1, aren't necessarily reliable team players. People running the support class don't tend to distribute ammo when you need them to. I have died plenty of times after finding multiple support players in my team begging them for ammo because I'm fighting somebody at an engagement distance with a pistol when I can't actually fight them because I've got no more shots in my primary gun. Same goes for medics, and frankly, I don't blame them. They don't always have time to look around to see all the people that need healing. The fact that they revive people is already a step better than the support players running around with ignoring me when I'm trying to get ammo. So when you put this reliance on team play, I'm just personally worried, and I will wait to see how it develops in the game, but I am worried that you're just going to be inhibiting good players who are actually capable of staying alive for more than 1 or 2 kills, because they're going to run out of ammo, run out of health, be unable to regenerate that health properly, and they're going to have very few people, if anybody, who's going to actually realize and help them, give them the ammo, give them the health they need. Unless of course you play in an active squad of 4 or 5 people on comms, that's going to be a problem. And let's be honest, most people don't play Battlefield like that. Some people play in smaller groups, 1, 2, 3 players, but very few players actually play on comms with 5 players or 4 players at one time. So I hope DICE is well aware of the target audience, their player audience, and the fact that they're not going to be able to force people to play in a team-orientated playstyle simply because it's necessary. They just won't do it. I wish they would. I really do wish they would, because it would make the game far more enjoyable, and I do my best when playing Battlefield 1 as medic, as support player, or as scout to use my gadgets to the benefit of my team whenever I can, but I'm well aware of the fact that many players don't do that. On a different note though, fortifications. Now fortifications are a brand new thing, as far as I know actually, for the Battlefield franchise as whole, definitely compared to Battlefield 4 or Battlefield 1. And I think they're a fantastic move. If they're done correctly, it's going to introduce more cover into the map. And as previously discussed in a video with Cookie, cover is just so lacking in Battlefield 1, and it's something that the Battlefield franchise can never really have enough of, at least personally, in my opinion. I'm a little bit skeptical on the offensive fortification options supposedly that the support is going to have regarding fixed machine guns or field cannons that they can build. I'm not a big fan of those kind of things, frankly, but other than that, I'm all on board and I'm ready to try it out. I want to see multiplayer footage of it happening, and I want to see the beta because I'm very much looking forward to this and to this addition to the Battlefield franchise. I think it's going to be fantastic for infantry combat. Regarding movement then, another topic clearly touched on both and information provided otherwise during the reveal event and even the trailer itself. Movement is getting a revamp, and on one hand I have no problem with it per se. I'm a little bit perplexed as to exactly why they're doing it though. Battlefield 1 was a step up in movement, and they did a lot of fine-tuning in Battlefield 1 to get movement just as they wanted it, just right, regarding how much you can side strafe, how fast your soldier accelerates, how fast your soldier moves, etc. And I personally think movement in Battlefield 1 is as good as it probably ever has been in a Battlefield game, at least in the recent game. I don't think there's room for improvement or need for improvement in that area. And the addition of things like crawling or sprint crouching isn't really an issue for me. The dolphin diving kind of thing, however, that I'm a little bit skeptical of. Anybody who's ever played multiplayer COD games knows exactly what happens when you have dolphin diving. Now, the devs have said they're aware of this and they're going to try and avoid this by, for example, meaning that you can't dolphin dive 5 times a second. But ultimately, if you've got a one-on-one and you're able to dolphin dive right in front of them, it's probably going to give you an advantage against your enemy. And it's going to look ridiculous, and it is a ridiculous mechanic to have in a first-person shooter to get an advantage in firefights. Ultimately, here's how I stand on movement in general. Movement should facilitate firefights. Movements should facilitate flanking and providing yourself with an advantage in a 2B engagement. It shouldn't, however, be an element within an actual firefight to give you an advantage, which is why side strafing AD/AD spam was nerfed in Battlefield 1. The devs seem to see this in a relatively similar fashion. Fast, quick, responsive movement is great, makes the game feel fantastic, provides players with more options regarding using cover, regarding using flanks, etc. But it shouldn't be to the point where during a firefight, by using a certain movement tactic, you are gaining an advantage over your opponent. It should be good old school recoil control, knowing your weapon, positioning, aim that really plays and determines the outcome of a firefight. Or of course team play as well. A 2-on-1 is very difficult to actually win if you're fighting against competent players. We've already touched a little bit here then on weapon design and talking about movement, and this is where some new interesting details at least have come out following the reveal event. There's supposedly no more visual recoil. There's a focus on recoil patterns, predictable recoil patterns, and supposedly either very little or at least less spread than in Battlefield 1. And generally this is positive. This is going more towards, although not quite exactly, what we had in Battlefield 4, where you had unequal horizontal recoil, that's to the left and right, so that you could essentially know your weapon would go roughly to the top right, and you'd accordingly adjust for that recoil when firing that weapon. Great addition, adds for at least a little bit more skill in gunfights. What I hope they don't do, and I'm not actually too worried about this, is eliminate spread completely. And don't misunderstand me here. I'm no fan of spread, but there's a reason it's in the game. It's to give weapons a set engagement distance and allow for other weapons to be usable, to be functional, to be justified in their existence essentially. And that is best exemplified by Battlefield 1 versus Battlefield 4. The medic rifles, the assault rifles in Battlefield 4 were the go-to weapon for most of the situations, and they were generally the better weapons. Many of these weapons were capable of basically engagements on 90% of any kind of relevant engagement distance, anything but extreme long range. Weapons like an AUG A3, a SCAR H, an ACE 23 or M416, even an L85A2 are weapons that are extremely flexible and had no limits to them and really almost no drawbacks. Whereas in Battlefield 1, you've got the close quarter SMGs, even more close quarter shotguns, and you've got this beautiful mid-range between where the LMGs start becoming, most of them at least, slightly ineffective because they are just not accurate enough, and the SLRs, or DMRs if it would be Battlefield 4, are in their ideal engagement distance. This has allowed for some fantastic, very enjoyable weapons such as the autoloading 835, such as the RSC, such as weapons like the 1906, which really I would be very upset to suddenly see them go and become irrelevant, because they will be if they're fighting against fully automatic weapons like an ACE 23 when it comes to the actual damage output. So I hope they find the middle ground here, but I actually am on the confident side regarding whether or not they're going to actually get that right. Last, but certainly not least then, let's talk specifically a little bit about this hardcore slash lack of health and ammo focus that they're going for. So a little bit of mix of afflictions and generally the hardcore changes. For example, nerfing spotting. That stuff, all fine. What I'm a little bit skeptical about, to be honest, is when they come and say that we're going to give you less ammo when you spawn, you're only going to be able to heal to a certain point. And here's why. I previously mentioned players aren't going to necessarily play as team. And that means that actually in doing so, you're going to be putting players that stay alive for a longer period of time at a disadvantage over players that have just spawned in freshly, which is exactly what they supposedly want to avoid. They've said they want to stop this spawn die mentality. But if they don't take into account how players actually play Battlefield 5 or Battlefield in generally, for the majority, then they're going to find themselves doing just the opposite of what they wanted to do, not making the game more skillful, but actually inhibiting players who are more skillful by giving them basically little ammo or little health to win most of their firefights after having engaged in a number of them already. Other than that, obviously there is a huge amount of information around Battlefield 5, not that I would be able to cover it in one video, and not frankly that I would want to. If you're interested in a detailed listing of all the changes regarding Battlefield 5 that we know of just yet, I'll link down below to a very good video by JackFrax, as well as an interview with a developer giving some more kind of details and explanations as to the changes. Feel free to click those, feel free to enjoy those. But with that being said, I'd really like to hear your guys' opinion on Battlefield 5, the information we know so far, the presentation, trailer, communication, customization, and game mechanic elements that have been released and introduced to us as community. Leave that, as well as, of course, your usual video suggestions down below in the comments. But with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 1 video.